Welcome to the Soul Trap live stream. Today we are going to talk about soul trap theory, which I think of as a modern Gnostic mythos or paradigm. So, um, this is also referred to as reincarnation trap. So, the basic idea is that we live our lives, we pass on, our soul goes into the afterlife, at which point we are tricked, essentially, into reincarnating over and over, just repeatedly. And that essentially is the soul trap or the reincarnation trap. And the idea of this paradigm, this idea, is that there are these entities that usually are referred to as either interdimensional beings or more often archons. And these archons are the ones that are motivated to keep us in that reincarnation trap because they feed off of the emotional energy that we produce while incarnated in the physical realm. Hey, everybody. Just wanted to say hi to the people that have shown up here. Twilight, Son of Lilith, welcome. The Occult Corner, glad to see you're here. 10-2 and Robbie, welcome to the live stream and welcome to anybody else who is here. I'd like to ask you to click the like button if you get a chance, and that will. Oh, True Detective, glad you're here. What I was saying is that if you guys could hit the like button, then that would help get this pushed out to more people, and we might get a bigger crowd here that we can interact with for this live stream. But the idea here. Oh, Triangle, yo. Nice to see you. So, the reason that the archons, they keep us trapped in this reincarnation trap, and they feed off of the emotional energy we generate while incarnate in the flesh. And especially the more negative, the emotions that we typically refer to as negative emotions are seen as a more potent form of this energy, which is often referred to by the term loosh. That is a term that was created by Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute, who was famous for pioneering the gateway method. Now, the gateway method is, you could call it a method for astral projection. It's a technique that's used to induce the out of body experience. And actually, it's interesting because this gateway process was analyzed by the US government to see whether there was any merit to it or if it had any uses. And that developed into what was referred to as Project Stargate, which we know about because of the Freedom of Information Act. So people have had documents have been released from these experiments and the reports made by agents in the CIA, for example. There's also some FBI documents that are very relevant to this sort of thing. I just mention it as something interesting. Awakened Mind, Kara, welcome, both of you. Let's see here. Scientists experiments, project, Anunnaki, Lucifer. Oh, I'm not sure. It looks like just a bunch of keywords there. True Detective said, I've been diving deep on this topic for years now. And actually, I believe that you were referred to me by Mark from Forever Conscious Research. So he talks a lot about the soul trap, and it'd be fun to have him on at some point if he's up to it. But yeah, I believe True Detective, he told you about my channel, and that's how we connected. So this soul trap thing, it's pretty interesting, and it has a lot of resonances with a lot of traditions from around the world. There's a lot of existing religions and esoteric traditions that talk about this sort of thing or something very similar. So we can see some obvious parallels in Gnosticism. In the Gnostic tradition, if you're not familiar with it, Gnosticism, the word Gnostic refers to the Greek word gnosis, which is it's supposed to mean direct experiential knowledge as opposed to, say, blind faith. So the Gnostics believed that you needed to have direct experiential knowledge of divinity, for example, that it wasn't sufficient just to believe it, just to believe somebody else's word for it, that you had to have your own direct experience with it. And that direct experiential knowledge is referred to as gnosis. And Gnosticism is a tradition built around that idea that has kind of embedded itself into a bunch of different religious traditions, but most famously, Christianity. So there was a whole Gnostic flourishing within early Christianity where they kind of took the Christian mythos and flipped it on its head, essentially. So if you read the Bible, for example, you will likely notice that the God of the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, engages in a lot of questionable behavior. So, for example, denies humans knowledge, doesn't want them to eat from the tree of knowledge so that they could be as knowledgeable as a god. And when they do, there appears to be some sort of council of gods where the main god is talking to other gods. It seems like, right, Elohim, and he refers to it in the plural, saying now that they've eaten from the tree of knowledge, they know good and evil just like a god. They have the knowledge of a god. We better kick them out of Eden before they eat of the tree of life and become immortal as well, because then they'll be equal to us. And so they booted them out. That was pretty questionable in the first place. And then you have the story of Adam and Eve and their children. And, we can get into a whole thing. We can get into a whole digression here, but let's just point out something. They have children. Cain and Abel are their first two. And Cain grows a garden of vegetables, and he, plants it, tends it, cares for it, nurtures these plants. And Abel, he herds cattle, essentially. And God says, I want you guys to give me a sacrifice. And that right there, immediately you're like, well, why does he want a sacrifice? And then Cain offers up the best crops, the best of what he grew to God. And Abel takes one of the animals that he's been herding and he kills it and spills its blood for God. And God liked that, but he didn't like the vegetables. So God wanted blood. He wanted death. He wanted that animal to die for him in his honor, right? So that's pretty questionable, even right there. And then you go further, and the whole hardening of the heart of the Pharaoh, and all the killing of all the innocent children in Egypt for one of the plagues. If you know the story, you know what I'm talking about. And as a child, when I read that, I thought, are we sure we're reading the right book here? Is this really God that they're talking about? Because he sounds like some sort of monster or demon or something not good. I think it seems pretty obvious. As a child, I thought that. And that's what the Gnostic Christian, uh, the Christians that were Gnostic influenced, they thought that too. And they said, that's some sort of false god, or flawed god at least, and therefore created a flawed creation. And there are a bunch of Gnostic texts that talk about how that god, which is referred to as the Demiurge, which means half maker, that Demiurge, or that false god, created the material plane, and since that god was flawed, so is the material plane, and that the Demiurge doesn't recognize anything above itself. And at one point, it saw a reflection of something higher than itself in a pool of water, and it took the light from that and it trapped it in a physical body as a way of trying to exert control over that thing that it perceived as potentially above us, or above itself. And its ego couldn't handle that, and so it tries to trap it, to exert control, exert superiority to it, as a way of avoiding that recognition that there may be something above it. And that whole thing, we can get into the weeds with this, but the idea being that we are those humans who are trapped in this physical matter. And when we die, that soul gets captured, as the soul tries to ascend to freedom, to other realms. And the Demiurge and the Demiurge's archons, which means rulers, and those are basically the henchmen, or even you could even say the archangels of the Demiurge. The Demiurge's henchmen, the archons, and the Demiurge will capture that soul on its way up and reincarnate, put it back down into a new body, and wipe its memory and keep doing it over and over again. And that, in a nutshell, is essentially the same idea as soul trap theory or reincarnation trap theory. There's a few different tweaks, but there's been a bunch of different variants of Gnosticism over the millennia, really, because this idea has been around for thousands of years. So I view this soul trap theory as a variant of Gnostic theology or Gnostic philosophy. Just gonna check the chat here. It looks like there's a fair bit of activity here. Occult Corner says, hell yeah, I love the sources and the evidence of facts. Thanks, Jeremy. Chris89 says the monad. Andrewcifer says, gives blessings and love. Thank you. The council is seen in Psalms 82. Ye are all gods as part of the discussion. Oh, interesting. And there's a couple places in the Bible that kind of indicate multiple gods. Deuteronomy, for example. And I have a video about that. If you look up can't remember the name of the thing. I think Enlil. Look up Enlil on my channel and any videos about that. Escape the Cube. That's another video that you might find relevant to this. Occult Corner says Seth as well. Sophia, Chris89 says Sophia. Yeah. So in the Gnostic theology, there's a whole sequence. So you have the monad, which is a single point of consciousness. Some people say that's the point of creation, or the center of it all. And a lot of people will think of that as like the true God in the sense. And emanating from that singular point, and some people compare this to the Big Bang, from that singular point, it emits, it splits essentially into two. And that first emanation is a pair. And that's referred to in Gnostic theology as a syzygy, that pair. And there are 4 pairs that come that in sequence. So that first pair gives rise to another pair, and that pair, and so on until you have 4 sets of syzygies. And that is referred to as the Ogdoad, which is a word. The Ogdoad is just a reference to the word number 8. Or sorry, the number 8 is a word that references the number 8. And it's just a way of referring to those 8 people. Okay. Many an animal and child suffer over people misunderstanding allegory. That's true. True detective. Derek says, oh, welcome, Derek. Derek says, so the term agnostic comes from this then. Yeah. So you have Gnostic, which is the idea that we require knowledge in order to achieve some sort of spiritual enlightenment or awakening. We have agnostic, which basically means that you don't believe, or that you don't care, in a sense. Not that you disbelieve. Like, it's not like, you know how you have the word morality or morals, or something is moral, and you have something is immoral, which means it's not moral. But then you have an in-between word, and that's amoral, meaning that it doesn't really take morality into consideration at all in the first place. It's not intentionally evil or good. It just is. It's amoral. It doesn't take that kind of thing into consideration whatsoever. Same thing with Gnostic and agnostic. Agnostic means you don't really, you're on the fence in a sense. You don't believe necessarily, but you don't disbelieve either. You're kind of like waiting for proof in a sense. And agnostic and Gnostic actually are pretty close, because Gnostics are waiting for proof as well, in a sense, but they actively seek it out. That's the main difference, I think. Chris89, keeping the machine running. Yeah, all the cogs. And so you have the obvious parallel to the Matrix movies. So in the Matrix, of course, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but it's been out for a really long time. So if in the Matrix you have individuals who are trapped in a simulation created by the rulers, which in this case are artificial intelligence. They've created this whole universe, really, a whole world that they've trapped the humans into. And it's a delusion. And the only reason that they do it, the motive for doing this, is so that they can harvest energy uh, from the people that they have trapped in there. Now, in soul trap theory, it's the same basic idea, and they call the energy that they're harvesting from the humans loosh. Now, it's not AI necessarily in the soul trap theory. It's more these spiritual or interdimensional entities that are doing it. Something outside of the simulation or outside of the world, the universe, that keep trapping souls into that dream, you could say, and manipulating the situation intentionally to provoke suffering in order to generate that loosh that they can feed off of. Vampiric entities, you could say. Canada Bear, thank you for showing up. I see that you accidentally went to the wrong stream. I'm glad you managed to find your way here. Andrewsifer says, I want out. Okay, so that brings us to the next stage of this discussion. So if there's a trap, can you get out of it? Or can you avoid the trap in some way? Well, the idea is that you've probably been stuck in the trap already for a long time, that you're currently in the trap, and some people refer to it as prison planet. Let me go a little bit deeper into some variants of this, actually, before we get into how to get out of it. So there are other versions of it too, like very similar to the Matrix model, where it's artificial intelligence entities, sentient AIs, or even AGI, you could say. These entities, instead of that, it is aliens. So there is a variant of this soul trap theory where there are aliens that have figured out a technology that they can harvest bio energy, emotional bioenergy that's generated by embodied souls, souls that are embodied in flesh, and that they keep us on the earth, the planet Earth specifically. And as we start to ascend spiritually from the earth and try to make our way into the greater cosmos, these aliens use technology, and some people say it's connected with the planet Saturn, that there is on Saturn itself, or even that Saturn is a giant machine with a hexagram on the North Pole and a giant spiral on the bottom, that there's some sort of machine in Saturn, or that Saturn itself is some sort of giant machine that they use to capture the souls as they're trying to escape and reincarnate them over and over again, as I said, in order to harvest that energy that we produce just by living, especially if we are suffering or having rage or anxiety and things like that, fear, that sort of thing. So there is a variant of the idea which is very literal, you could say, or very materialistic in a sense, where it's a very material thing. There are physical machines that are taking this energetic body that separates from the physical body, and they're sending it back down to go into other physical bodies again. Now that one is not as popular, but I thought it was interesting, and I thought that it would be, for completion's sake, that we should address that one. Now the standard one, if you look into the idea of it, and we aren't necessarily reincarnating on the earth every time. We could be reincarnating on a different planet in a completely different solar system, but somewhere in the universe. And we may not even be reincarnating as humans, but as some sort of physical creature that we keep getting. Not necessarily even a creature, you know, they could be a plant or some other life form, or even in some cases, people say that it could be even an apparently non or inanimate object that we can even reincarnate into. Let's see here. Connor says you sound like goth Terrence McKenna. Let's see here. What is Gnostic Luciferian magic? Andrew Lucifer asks. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into that as we get further in. 210 says Gnostic equals knower with experience. Agnostic is the same application of the A in atypical as in not typical. So agnostic is not a knower without experiential knowledge or gnosis. Yeah, essentially, it's somebody who doesn't know. They don't, but they're not necessarily seeking either. Let's see here. Rick and Morty had an episode like this. Yeah, there's some cool episodes of Rick and Morty that talk about that sort of thing. There is an episode where there is a video game at Chits and Blitz, something like that. They go to this arcade and there's a video game called Roy, and you put a helmet on and you become fully immersed in this game. You forget. Your memory is wiped temporarily. Your memory is wiped and you are born as Roy. And then you go through thinking that this is your life. And you make your decisions, you do all the various different things. And then at the end of when you die, you come out of the video game and you're like, oh, wow, I did all those things. And Rick is really good at it. And he goes off grid. He doesn't even have like a social insurance number or anything like that. It's one of the jokes. Somebody's like, oh, he's taking Roy off grid. And in another episode, they have that same game, but it malfunctions. And Morty was playing the game, and something happened with the game, a malfunction, and Morty's consciousness got split into all of the non-player characters instead of Roy. So all of the other characters in the game have 1/8 billionth of Morty's psyche, and Rick has to go into the game as Roy and try and collect up as many parts of Morty's psyche as possible and get them all out at the same time to get Morty out of the game safely. And I think that is an amazing analogy for some of the things that we might talk about here. Let's see here. So that's the black cube. Yeah, so the black cube is a representation of, it's connected with Saturn, but it's also used as a symbol of the material universe as a whole. And we kind of get trapped in the cube. Let me see here. Xander says, do not step into the light. Okay, right. I forgot about that part. So in this soul trap theory, they say that based off of a lot of near-death experiences that people have reported, or even death experiences where they've been clinically dead and come back from it, often you hear people saying that they will encounter some sort of entity that is very comforting. It could be a religious figure, such as Jesus or Buddha or Moses or Muhammad, or you know, any whatever one is meaningful to you personally, or it could be a relative who had passed on, your grandparent or your parent, for example, or a sibling that has passed on, and that they will see that person and they will comfort them and say, um, they will encourage them to go into the light. You know, they'll look and there'll be some sort of tunnel, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and you're encouraged to go into that tunnel and enter the light. Now, in soul trap theory, that light represents rebirth. So if you go into that tunnel, you get reincarnated into the flesh again. And the cycle begins again. You got trapped, you got tricked into going into the light and becoming reincarnated again. You have to start another cycle. Now, some ways that they get you to go into that light are by telling you that you're needed, and that may be not necessarily reincarnation. It could be that you go back into your original body instead of dying. You get revived. Or you could die and you could be reincarnated into a new body, depending on the circumstances. But the people who have reported near-death experiences, they've come back into their same body. But if the body is gone and there's no hope of recovery, then you just go in. Then you go into a new body. And sometimes they'll trick you into going into there by saying you're needed. We need you to help, or you have karma to work off, and we will put you into a situation that you can have the experiences necessary in order to work off that karma. Or they play on your heartstrings and say, it'll be like a dead relative that's in the form of presenting as your dead relative or lover or whatever, somebody that meant something a lot to you that passed on. You'll encounter an entity that looks and claims to be them, and they'll say, let's go back together, and this time we can be siblings, or we can be married again. If it was, say, your spouse that you encountered, and they say we can go back and be reincarnated again, and we'll find each other, and live together again. Different things like that, that will trick you, that will try and convince you, and you have to go willingly. That's the thing. And so this is one way out. If you can recognize it for what it is in the moment, then you can refuse to go into that white light, which some say that corridor with the white light at the end is the birth canal. Some people say that, where you enter into a body that is just being born. Not everybody says that in particular, but that is one of the variants of this theory. And so they'll trick you into that. And the idea, one way out, and this is just one of many ways, but one of the ways is, in that moment, if you can recognize it for the trap that it is, that you can refuse to do that. Now, some people say you can demand answers and say, show me all the exits. And for some reason, in this theory, they have to tell you the answer to that. They were able to lie about other things, but for some reason they have to tell you the truth about this. So that's kind of a bit of a plot hole. But either way, they say don't go into that light, go off and potentially explore other realms, or exist in in the void in some way. And we can talk about the void as well. But let me see if there's any more questions. Okay, yeah, Derek has says here, based on the various beliefs combined with the rapid pace at which AI is developing, do you think that one day it will be known by humans for fact as to what happens when our physical body dies? That's a great question. Impossible to answer, but I can speculate. I think that this soul trap theory actually ties together a lot of different religions and traditions. And we talked about the Gnostic current or the Gnostic philosophy, the core ideas behind that. And that alone has incredible parallels. You have also a lot of Eastern traditions have some very similar ideas, such as in Hinduism and Buddhism, even Taoism, the esoteric side of it, has some of these ideas, such as in Hinduism, they talk about Maya, which means illusion, and it refers to the whole physical universe, that it's a form of illusion, that it's a dream in the mind of Brahma, that everything is a dream dreamed up by Brahma. And that is very similar to the idea of the Demiurge creating this whole universe as a type of simulation or you know, an illusion, a trap. So if you can take the various different esoteric traditions, the various different religions, various different aspects of philosophy, you could start to come up with a consensus. You could say, okay, well, what do all of these different things agree on? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's true. It just means that these beliefs have come up independently in different religions. Now, we don't know exactly how independently because there's always cross-pollination between different cultures. But some cultures were very isolated for very long periods of time, and some of them still have some of these very similar ideas. And I think that if we look at how nature works, we see these types of cycles over and over again. We see organic matter continuing to get recycled over and over into various different life forms, including our own. And so there is this Hermetic axiom, which is summarized by as above, so below. And it also is as below, so above. So the idea is that by looking at patterns and understanding one realm of existence, we can gain some insight about what other levels of existence can operate as. Now, there may be different rules of how they work, but there are similarities and they can be translated. And so using that theory, we can observe the natural world and we can make conclusions about how the non-physical or more subtle realms operate as well. So, but that's comes down to a belief. So all of this is belief and how you understand things. Chris89 said, so it is a choice. Yeah. So in the soul trap theory, you have to consent to being reincarnated again. Now, if you look at Tibetan Buddhism, they have a document called the Bardo Thodrol, which is usually translated into English as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And it's not a direct translation, it's more of a title or a description of what the first Westerners thought that the book was about. And it's a pretty accurate way of describing it. But most people who study Tibetan Buddhism, including Tibetans who grew up with it or are monks in that tradition, will even say a more accurate translation of that book title is The Book of Finding Liberation in the In-Between State. And that in-between state doesn't have to be in between one life and another, but that's a major in-between state. It's one of the more potent in-between states for getting that liberation. And liberation in that context is liberation from samsara, which is a cycle of reincarnation. So again, we have another religion which agrees very closely with soul trap theory. Now, you don't necessarily have the concept of archons that are feeding off of the loosh that we generate, but there are other elements that you could say that keep us here, and that's typically ignorance in that tradition. Ignorance of the true nature of the experience that we're having. And this ties into one of the other methods of escaping the soul trap. So in this, you have dreaming, lucid dreaming in particular. So most times, for most people, when we fall asleep and dreams arise spontaneously in our mind, we get caught up in that dream, we get caught up in the narrative, and we begin identifying with a particular dream character within that narrative, within that dream that arose within our mind. We identify with it, and we forget that we're dreaming. We forget that we've fallen asleep and that we've entered into a dream, and we just accept the situation that's being presented to us, the experience that we're having. We accept it as, we think of it as a physical experience typically. Chris89 says, I control mine. Yeah, I know. There are plenty of people that have lucid dreams, some people who have them every single night, but what I said was most people most of the time, which I think is fairly accurate. I don't think most people most of the time are lucid dreaming. So in that situation, you are ignorant of the true nature of the experience that you're having in the moment. And because of that, you are caught up in the narrative. And let's say something happens, like somebody comes after you with a knife, starts running at you, screaming, I'm gonna kill you, or whatever, right? You think that you're having a physical experience in that moment, and you get frightened. All kinds of emotions come up. You are terrified, and you run, or you try and fight. The fight or flight response gets triggered. And if you were lucid in that moment, if you knew that you were asleep and having a dream, then when you saw a dream character coming at the dream character that you're experiencing the dream through, the one that you've identified with, your dream character, you could say your avatar in the dream, you understand that there's nothing that it can do to truly hurt you. For, there are no real consequences. So if you wanted to, the fear goes away. You don't have that emotional response anymore. And you think, there might be some residual apprehension, but nothing like when you thought it was a embodied physical experience. You can, if you have enough presence of mind in that moment, and you are lucid or aware of the fact that you are asleep and dreaming, then you can just let that other dream character come at you with the knife, and maybe they're gonna attack you with it, maybe not, but what does it really matter? You can just be like, oh, okay, getting stabbed, right? Getting attacked, and you're just like, oh, okay, this is an interesting experience, right? And you have no really intense emotional, you're not generating that loosh in that moment. And so this can be a way of practicing that experience of becoming embodied into a situation where you don't remember anything that came before it. You get so caught up in it and you take it literally. You can take dreams seriously, but don't take them literally. And that allows you to explore the dream, and you can find meaning in it without getting caught up in it, without getting caught up. And you're generating all these emotional experiences, which in Buddhism, they say actually generates karma. And that's not just a cause and effect type thing. It's more about habits, building habits and predilections and default ways of going about things, or even expectations that, and sense of responsibility, even in order to play the role that you found yourself in. That's karma, the real meaning of it. And you can work out the karma by being spontaneous, by not fulfilling the role that you feel like you've been placed in, or that you can act outside of the character that you're playing, in a sense. And that helps you break out of the conditioning or the brainwashing that you may have done to yourself. Let's see if there's any more. There's a couple more comments here. How can you master this experience? Okay, yeah, we're gonna get to it. Now, a lot of us, Luke's Leather says a lot of us did volunteer to incarnate here, but it still takes work to get to remember. Chris says it's about wakening up to this reality and rediscovering what was lost and forgotten. Are starseeds real? Andrew says. I don't really know a lot about starseed. I heard rumors that it was racist or something. I don't know enough about it to comment on starseed. Although I do have a little booklet called the Starseed Transmissions or something like that, but I've never read it. I just got it from I saw it years and years ago from some used bookstore before I ever heard about what it was about or anything like that. Derek says, would Christianity be considered a soul trap? You've got a God who demands you give up your soul to him. In soul trap theory, is there an entity that is looked up to, or is it an I? Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if the starseed thing is racist or not, because I know Andrew's first talking about it. I just heard rumors that it was. So just be aware of that if you research it, that there could be some of that in there. I don't know if that's true, or maybe somebody might have been overreacting or misinterpreting something. I'm not gonna say that it is or it isn't because I don't really know. I just it's something I heard. I haven't done any research on that. So yeah, Christianity. Christianity is mainstream Christianity. The various different sects of mainstream Christianity, they worship the demiurge in Gnostic terms. If you look at it from a Gnostic perspective, they worship the demiurge, and they believe that going into the light is to go into heaven and to be united with God. And so they're tricked into going into the light that way. So that is one of the philosophies that trap people in the soul trap. Now, I'm a Gnostic Luciferian. That's how I identify. And the idea here is that I do believe in a lot of these Gnostic ideas. And I feel like there is a demiurge, which I identify very much a lot of parallels with the idea of Brahman, or Brahma, I should say, from the Hindu philosophy that is dreaming the universe. And, you know, if you look at H.P. Lovecraft's material, his fiction, he has this character called Azathoth, and he calls it the blind idiot god who is dreaming the universe, or at least believes himself to be dreaming the universe. So I like to think of this character as very much the demiurge, where the demiurge itself is a creation, but it believes that it's the thing that the only thing at one point before it created the universe, because it is a blind idiot god. And in Gnosticism itself, it's the demiurge is often referred to as the blind one, not as the idiot god, but as that's H.P. Lovecraft's kind of twist on that. But in Gnosticism, the demiurge is referred to as blind, and I see that as the demiurge created the universe by dreaming it, and not in a conscious way, that the universe arose spontaneously like a dream. And now this is where it kind of gets complicated. In my personal version, or my variant of my understanding of this, the demiurge itself is a character in that dream that has arisen within substrate mind, with a capital M, which I often refer to as a grand mind or a universal mind, that this dream of existence is spontaneously arising from. And the demiurge is a character in that dream that thinks that it created the dream. So imagine, as an analogy, a video game, and Super Mario is in the game and he thinks that he's creating the game, where he's actually a character within the game. He's a product of the game. He's not generating the game, he's in the game, right? And that's the delusion of the demiurge. The demiurge is a dream character, a very powerful dream character that believes itself to have generated the dream. Now, this has a very personal analogy that when you are in a dream and you recognize it as a dream, like say you go to sleep, a dream arises within your mind spontaneously, you did not create it consciously, right? You end up getting sucked into it and identify with a particular dream character, and all the other dream characters you think are not you. So this is very typical for somebody, especially a very beginner lucid dreamer. Even seasoned lucid dreamers will have this delusion where the dream arises, one of the characters in the dream is being experienced through the point of view of that dream character, and you identify with that dream character. You think that that dream character is you, and that everything else in the dream is a figment of your imagination in a sense, or is, yeah. So you'll hear people talk about this, like on lucid dreaming subreddit, for example, or in various different communities. Like back in the day, I used to be a part of a lucid dreaming Yahoo email list, you know, back in the day. I'm dating myself, but people would say that they became lucid and then they started telling other dream characters, hey, you're not real. You're in my dream. Which, if you really think about it, no, they're not. You are a dream character. You're identifying with that dream character, and that dream character is telling another dream character, you're in my dream. It's like if Mario told Luigi, hey, you're not real. You're in my dream. Well, both of them are characters in the same game. It's not, neither one of them is generating the dream. Both of them are products of the dream. So this is very typical. People will have that delusion that they are generating the dream, but they're a dream character within it. And they will dismiss every other aspect of the dream as not them. They think, oh, this is a dream that I'm creating, but it's not me. I'm this dream character that I'm experiencing the dream through. So imagine the Demiurge in that same kind of a situation. The Demiurge is a dream character that thinks that it is dreaming the whole universe. And it doesn't like the implication that it isn't that. So it's a semi-lucid, I guess you could say, but not fully lucid. It's a not fully lucid dream character. And in my opinion, it can become lucid. And that would be a good thing. Let me see here. Out of nothing comes everything, Chris89 says. I'm not sure where. Yeah, out of nothing comes everything, exactly. And you can think of this mathematically as well. So everything can be nothing at the same time. So imagine you have zero, right? Nothing. You start with nothing. And you can add as many ones to that zero as you want, as long as you add an equal number of negative ones. So you can have billions, trillions, decillions, which is a new number that I learned recently. As long as you have the same number on the other side of the equation as a negative. And if you put it all together, it still equates back to zero. So you can create infinity as long as you create negative infinity at the same time. And that's how you can get something out of nothing. And that's how everything equates to nothing at the same time. And that's just a mathematical way of looking at it. But yeah, the dreaming one as well. The dream arises from the mind, which is nothing and it's everything at the same time. It's pure potential. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Yeah, it's a very relevant nursery rhyme song. Under fire, welcome. I would avoid Lucifer. You have no clue what type of evil and how much misery he wishes upon you, being that can easily manipulate you and lie to you with no chance. Yeah. That's not what Lucifer's about. Lucifer is... The word Lucifer means bringer of light. Light, since time immemorial, has been a symbol of knowledge and awareness. And I'm using the word Lucifer in its literal meaning of the bringer or bearer of light in terms of knowledge and awareness. So it's that force of enlightenment, that force of awakening or becoming aware, that force of lucidity, becoming aware. So, yeah, you're talking about like a Christian belief, and Lucifer isn't Satan, and you know, we can get in. That's a different subject. I've got a million videos on my channel that go into that in more depth. If you wanted to check that out, Lucifer is my guide to excellence and happiness. And Drucifer says, yeah. So, Under Fire is very convinced and believes that everybody else is wrong. So. So yeah, once you believe that you know the truth, then you can't learn anything anymore. So don't even bother. Don't even bother with somebody who's that convinced about something. There's no conversation to be had, really. They've already made up their mind, and you're wrong, they're right. Okay, fine. Light bear since this fall. What fall? What fall? What are you talking about? Anyways, I'm not going to get into that conversation in this. This is not about that. But the idea of Lucifer that I'm talking about here is the light bearer archetype, which is like you see in the story of Prometheus, for example, where Prometheus takes forbidden knowledge that the gods don't want humans to have and gives them knowledge of how to use fire, which they didn't have before. And now they're much more independent. They have a higher potential to do greater things, and they are not as dependent on the Olympian gods anymore. They're not just ignorant slaves anymore or servants of the gods. And that's why Zeus is pissed. He doesn't like that. He wanted a compliant, ignorant servant in humans. And Prometheus kind of wrecked that, to some extent. And so Prometheus gets punished for that. Eventually he gets unbound, but that is the basic idea behind it. And you see that same pattern play out in a bunch of different stories. The serpent in Eden, encourages humans to take from the tree of knowledge, to eat from the tree of knowledge, and to, instead of being ignorant servants in the garden, and to become aware and conscious in their own right. So this idea is the rebellion against oppressive authority, right, as well. So this idea of challenging authority and obtaining hidden and forbidden knowledge that can disrupt these oppressive power structures and weaken their power base by exposing the truth. So, for example, Galileo, he he said, "Listen, we got it all wrong about the way that the Earth is not the center of the universe, and there are." He said a bunch of things that he observed, and they refused to even look in a telescope so that he could show them what he was talking about. They refused to even look. Now that's intentional ignorance there. But the thing is, the things he was saying went against established Catholic Christian doctrine, and it weakened the power structure of the church. And they had huge amount of power at the time, and he faced severe punishment for it. He was almost put to death. He had to recant. Hundreds of years later, he was pardoned, and the Vatican apologized. He was vindicated, but in the moment, he was sharing knowledge, forbidden knowledge, to humanity that undermined an oppressive power structure. And he did so at great personal risk. And that's what I'm talking about. That's the Luciferian archetype. And that's the kind of perspective that an individual who is trying to escape the soul trap will embody. Now, I don't necessarily feel like this is just a complete prison or a trap or any of that stuff. I feel like a lot of these ideas are related to the demonization of the flesh and thinking of the earth or material plane in general as unclean or impure or inherently evil in some way. And I feel like this is a holdover from a lot of right-hand path type religions, such as Christianity, for example. And I reject that idea itself. So a lot of the soul trap people, they just want to escape and be done with it and just leave everything behind. Now, there is a concept in Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, of the bodhisattva. Now, the bodhisattva is essentially somebody who has reached roughly the equivalent level of attainment as a Buddha or an enlightened being, but they intentionally choose to reincarnate back into this simulation, this grand dream in the mind of universal mind. They keep continuing to participate in it in the hopes that they can help guide others towards that awakening, that realization, that recognition, that truth about the nature of reality, and to free themselves from the bonds of ignorance. Like I was saying before, when you are in a non-lucid dream, you are subject to the powers and influences of the situation you find yourself in. You react emotionally, instinctually, habitually, in ways that you may not react if you understood the true nature of the reality that you are experiencing at the time. So in the waking experience, the so-called waking experience, if that is also a different level of dream, maybe like a grant, like another nested level of dream, what I like to refer to it as, it's like a multiplayer game. So you have your console, your video game console, and you can play a game on your own, solo, not even connected to the internet or anything like that, just connected to your television that you can view. You got your controller and you can interact and you can play and you can get caught up in the game and whatever, just on your own. That's like going to sleep and having your own dream. You're interacting locally on your own console. Now, when you are awake, in having the waking experience, then it's like you're still playing a game and you're still playing that game on that console, but it's connected to a server, and there are other people that are also playing that game in that same shared environment on the server. So that's kind of the analogy that I'm using for that. And I kind of lost my train of thought there. Let me go back here. Okay, so to get out of it, some people say when you die, you simply refuse to go into the light. You go off into either the void, which is non-experience. You're not having a waking experience. You're not having a dreaming experience. You're not having an astral projection type experience. You're not having any experience whatsoever. You are just existing in the void of non-experience as pure consciousness. And you can just abide in that void infinitely if you choose. Or you can choose to explore the more subtle realms. Some people call them astral planes. And you can explore the astral cosmos, in a sense, if you want, as a free agent, as a sovereign entity. And you can choose to reincarnate. And now in the soul trap theory, that's a no-no. That's you've fallen for the trap. But in my personal understanding, and in the idea, for example, in Tibetan Buddhism with the bodhisattva, you could go back in, but with more knowledge. So in the Bardo Thodrol, aka Tibetan Book of the Dead, there is a sequence that you go through, and you may not be able to escape being reincarnated necessarily, but if you play it right, you can at least influence the context of your next incarnation, and you can hopefully pick something that is going to be favorable for you to hopefully have the kind of environment that will trigger that lucidity, that awareness, that recognition of the situation that you're in, that you can recognize that samsaric cycle, that maya, of that illusion, that simulation. And then from that point, you can start to help others have those same recognitions. And the more people that become lucid in the waking experience, the waking dream or the simulation, people that can wake up to the simulation and recognize it for what it is, the more lucidity is brought to that universal mind in general, and we can eventually come to a point where the dream itself is much more conducive to exploration, and it's not about being trapped or suppressed or fed upon by other entities within the dream or any of that kind of thing, or by entities from outside the dream or anything like that. That the idea in the bodhisattva idea is to continue to reincarnate until all sentient beings have achieved enlightenment. And this idea, in some forms of Gnosticism, there is the idea that the Demiurge can be redeemed. And it's a very rare, not a lot of Gnostic variants of the philosophy will have that in there. A lot of them are just about escaping. Get out of here, leave it behind, whatever. Don't worry about it, right? Now, for me, I would like to see the Demiurge become aware that he's a character in the grand dream and not the creator of it, right? And the dramatic impact that would have on the experience of individual components within that dream, individual sub-entities, entities such as you and I, would be dramatically different if we were in a situation where some of the more powerful or higher level in terms of complexity and scale entities like that, if they were more aware, then that would have a dramatic impact on the universe. And in a sense, it's kind of healing that rift, that damage. A lot of people refer to it as a damaged creation or a flawed creation, because the creator was flawed or did so in a blind, incomplete way. But that, I think, the Demiurge can be redeemed, can achieve a higher level of awareness and can realize. So now, like I said, there's an analogy with an individual lucid dreaming. Now, some people, when they first start to lucid dream, they will treat the other dream characters as playthings. And they will sometimes even do horrible things to these dream characters just because they feel like there's no consequences. So they'll attack the dream character or, use it in whatever way it feels for their own entertainment. Volume full blast, difficult to hear. I don't know. I've got the mic right up to my mouth. It's I don't know. I'm looking at the signal here. It's a pretty good signal. Sorry, I'm not. Does anybody else have any problems hearing me? Chris89, I've met others in my dreams. So how do you know that it's not just another dream character? And, when you are in your dream, now I do believe that it's possible that when we, for the purposes of the discussion that we've been having today, I've been referring to our own individual dreams as kind of like a personal sandbox, in a sense, where we're interacting within our own psyche. But I do believe that that level of experience represents not necessarily just our own psyche, that there can be signals from outside that we're kind of picking up on as well, that it is a subtle form of consciousness, and that most dreams we tend to just hang around our own personal little area of the astral plane, which is composed mostly of components within our own psyche, but that we can venture out beyond that, that we're not limited to that. But for the purposes of our discussion today, I've simplified it by just referring to it as almost like you're interacting within your own psyche when you have your own dream. Okay, Canada Bear says that there's no audio issue for her. That's great. Okay, so what have I left out of this discussion? So this ties into my theory on the states of being. We kind of touched on that. So you have the so-called waking experience, which we are having right now, presumably. And I like to refer to that as the solar dream. It's a very powerful, intense set of data that's coming into our mind that overwhelms pretty much any other signal. Just like during the day, if you go outside and look up the sky, the sun is so bright and giving off so much light, you can't see the stars or planets or any other celestial objects in the sky. Sometimes the moon during the day you can see a little bit faintly. When it's getting really close to sunset or really close to sunrise, sometimes, or just barely after sunrise, sometimes you can see Venus briefly when the sun is just coming up or just going down. But generally, when the sun's up, it takes over. You can't see anything else. Other sources of light, other celestial objects, that one is dominating. So that analogy, when we are having the waking experience or the so-called waking experience, I call it the solar dream. The mind is getting data from the physical sense organs of the body, presumably, like the eyes, ears, are being stimulated by frequencies of light and sound. And those forms of energy, the sound waves, compressed air, patterns of compressed air, patterns of light frequency that manage to get into the iris of your eye and trigger the rods and cones on your iris, or retina, I should say, that gets translated into an electrochemical signal, which travels down the optic nerve or whatever pathway that the sense organ has to get that signal to the brain. The brain receives that raw data and it looks for meaningful patterns in that data. When it finds patterns that it has determined through experience generally or through genetic evolution, you could say, of the human body, a combination of those things, when a pattern in that data has been recognized as meaningful, then the mind renders that pattern into a symbolic experience and presents it to the point of conscious awareness, which we then get caught up in and think that we're experiencing reality directly. We're not. We're experiencing a symbolic representation, a fully immersive, three-dimensional, completely immersive experience, but it's a symbolic representation of meaningful patterns in a data stream that we have been tuned to. So what ends up happening is when we go to bed, we lie down and we close our eyes, we're not really moving around. That solar signal, which is the data coming from the sense organs, gets muted by a considerable amount. And the way that our mind kind of slows down and falls asleep, those signals get muted from the body. You know, we do it manually by trying to have a quiet environment. We turn off the lights. We get in a comfortable position where we don't have to move around a lot. We make sure we're warm enough, but not over warm or not too cold, so we don't have a lot of stimulation in that sense. We're not eating anything generally when we're trying to go to sleep. We're not getting a lot of data coming in from the sense organs when we're lying in bed trying to fall asleep. And anytime we do get noises or the light comes on, things like that, it can distract us and it can prevent us from falling asleep. So falling asleep is essentially the solar channel of data, which I said is my term for the sense organ data, the raw data, electrochemical signals coming in. Those get muted considerably, and it allows us to focus on the more subtle data streams, the more subtle forms of consciousness that we have access to, but in the presence of the solar signal, it gets drowned out. So I refer to this as the lunar channel, which encompasses the astral plane. And that includes your own personal dreams, as well as astral projection or really meaningful dreams where you kind of get out of your own personal little space and in your own little personal area of the astral. But regardless of those more subtle forms of data, they come in and the mind does the exact same thing. It tunes in on those more subtle data streams, and it detects meaningful patterns in those data streams, and it renders it as a symbolic experience and presents it to the conscious mind. It's the same, I call it a hologram generator function of the mind that's operating when we're having the waking experience or solar dream. It's the same function of the mind that's operating when we have the asleep dreaming experience, or what I call the lunar dream. And that can also include an astral projection. And it's that same hologram generator function of the mind that's operating in both situations. Anytime we're having an experience, that hologram generator, or might as well call it experience generator, is operating. It's that same function. It's just tuned to a different channel. And that's why dreams, when we fall asleep and have a dream, it can feel so vivid, so real, that when we wake up, we question reality and we're like, wow, that dream felt sometimes even more real than the experience I'm having right now when I'm awake. It's because it's the same function of the mind that's generating that experience in the first place. It's a simulation, but it's either the solar simulation, where it's a simulation where you're tuned to the solar channel, or it's a simulation where you're tuned to a lunar channel. And the third major state that we could say is when the hologram generator is not operating. It's not turned on, you could say. And in that situation, there's no experience being generated. That to me is what I refer to as the void. You are abiding within substrate mind itself without an experience arising within it. This essentially is base reality. not the experience that you're having when you're awake. That's a simulation that's arisen within a substrate mind. And in soul trap theory, they talk about how instead of going into the light, into the tunnel that's got the light, rather than doing that, one of the options is to go into the void. And this is that void that I'm talking about, that non-experience, that really, that is the closest you're going to come to base reality, is abiding in the non-experience of the void. Any experience that you have is arising within that substrate mind as a simulation. So this is what I was trying to get at, is that you don't have to wait until you die to experience that void. It's actually around, it's omnipresent. It's currently existing. We just we're not as aware of it because we're so caught up in the experience that has arisen within it. We're so caught up in the narrative of the waking experience, or the solar dream, or the lunar dream, depending on what we're experiencing at the moment. We're so caught up in it that we're not aware of the substrate mind that it's arising within. But it's there. And if you can recognize it, you can tap into that awareness of that substrate mind. Even when we're awake, you can tap into that. But now here's the wild thing. With enough training and practice and strength of mind, you can be conscious during deep dreamless sleep, where there is no hologram generator active at that point. There's no experience being generated of the waking experience or the solar dream. There's not a lunar experience being generated. There's no lunar dream. There's no solar dream. There's no lunar dream. No dream. There's no experience being generated. It's not active in that moment. You're just abiding within the void of substrate mind itself directly when we go to sleep and have non-dream, deep dreamless sleep. You can be conscious during that, and that's being conscious within the void. And if you can maintain conscious awareness in that most subtle level of consciousness, in that pure substrate mind, the void, devoid of experience, essentially nothingness and everythingness at the same time, and neither. You're abiding within that void, and you can do that every night if you have the right kind of training and practice and mental discipline, you could say. You can abide consciously within that substrate mind without an experience, which is pretty wild. And so you can tap into that while awake. You don't have to wait until you die to try and enter into that bardo or in-between state. Some people say it's in between the arising of one simulated experience or another. So I'll let that sink in for a second here while I have a bit of tea. It's actually a pretty cool mug. It can tell you when it's still hot. The black part turns to yellow. So that's just where the level of the tea is here. This actually came from Tim Hortons. It was a gift from my mother-in-law, I think. The famous cafe in Canada, the fast food cafe that's super popular that I never ever go to. Okay, let's see if there's any comments here. Oh yeah, wow, there's a whole bunch. The demiurge is evil, and Drucifer said. Well, that's a judgment call. That's you're passing judgment on that by saying it's evil. I think it's more complex than that. Would you say that you are evil when you are in a dream and you believe you've become lucid and you believe that all the dream characters in the dream are just unreal figments of your imagination and you can use them as playthings, where you could attack them and hurt them because you think it might be fun to do something like that with no consequences, when really it's a misunderstanding. You've assumed that these are unreal when they are projections of an aspect of your psyche. The dream character itself isn't directly a part of your psyche, it's a projection, a symbolic representation of an aspect of your psyche. And it's dynamic, it's interactive, but it's part of you. And if you are going and hurting other parts of yourself, are you being evil or are you just being ignorant? Right? You're acting from a sense of ignorance. You don't realize that what you're doing is harmful to your psyche. You think there's no consequences because you don't fully recognize the implications of the state that you're in. You have some level of awareness. You realize that you're asleep and dreaming, but you don't have the full wisdom. Sophia is a Greek word for wisdom, and it's been mentioned here in the chat a few times. And that's in Gnostic theology, Sophia made a mistake and created the demiurge without her syzygy partner. And that's why the demiurge was flawed, because it was made in an imbalanced way, which was a mistake, that Sophia made. And some people say she did it on purpose, knowing what it would lead to, and eventually that when it gets corrected or fixed, in a sense, that it creates a greater reality. Different ways of looking at it. But you're lacking that. You may have that awareness, but you're lacking the full wisdom that informs it. And so you're still acting in ignorance, even though you're in a lucid dream, you're still acting in ignorance. Is that really evil? And I think of that same kind of perspective of the demiurge, that the demiurge is just acting out of ignorance, doesn't realize doesn't have the wisdom, doesn't have that Sophia. Sophia is something above it that it doesn't have, that it has denied. It thinks it knows everything for itself, and it believes it to be itself to be the generator, the producer of everything as well. So I don't think that the demiurge is evil. I think the demiurge is ignorant in a sense and acting from that ignorance. And that's something that can be fixed. Let's see here. Dreams aren't always just dreams. Yeah, we live in a very wake-centric society. Most people do. Most human societies on the planet right now are wake centric, meaning we think of the solar dream or the waking experience, we think of it as real. And the lunar dream or astral projection, out of body experiences, dreaming in general, as not real. Whereas both are, in my opinion, both are just as real and just as unreal as each other, because both are simulations. Both are symbolic representations of an aspect of reality, but it's not reality. It's like looking at a map. It's like, okay, here's an analogy. You got a map that is pretty solid and it doesn't change too much. Like let's say you have an app, right? You have two different apps. One app has a map of a very consistent environment and it doesn't really change all that much. And then you have another map which is in the same format, but it's mapping a territory that is very dynamic and changes a lot. And it's like saying, oh, well, that map, this map here on my phone, that is reality. Whereas this other app, this other map that I'm looking at that changes a lot and isn't very consistent, that's fake, you know? When both of them are just apps. They're both maps. You're looking at maps and you're saying this map is real, where it's not real. It's just a map. It's a symbolic representation of something. And both of them are symbolic representations of data, meaningful patterns that your mind has picked out as meaningful in a vast ocean of data. But you're picking from two different bandwidths of data, right? I think both of them are real in a sense that they are symbolic representations of real data, but they are not real in the sense that it's a symbolic simulation of that data, of parts of that data. So dreams aren't always just dreams. You know, that's a saying that we have, oh, it's just a dream. You know, it's not real. You know, people say that all the time. Or they say a pipe dream when they think somebody has got an imagination that is they're too far, their heads are in the cloud, right, or whatever. That they're not, they're dreaming about something that can never be real. Or, you know, hey buddy, you're dreaming, buddy, you know, that kind of thing, where they're deriding something for being of that other bandwidth of data rather than the solar channel. Anything that's not the solar channel of data, that other set of data is not real. This data is real, you know? And I think I've kind of, hopefully you understand what I mean. I don't want to keep beating a dead horse. Chris, I think bros screw the light. They physically try to pull us into. Yeah, so that's the other thing too, is that the light and the darkness are both simulations as well. It's the void, which is neither dark nor light. It's both at the same time. The void itself is what darkness and light arise from, you know? Let's see. So yeah. Let's see here. What else do we have? Athena Hyel says, my husband says he was tricked into waking up and into realizing he was spiritual. That's funny. And Drucifer said, being gay made me realize everything. And Andrew Safer also says, does Jeremy have a Discord server? Yeah. So there is a Discord server that if you want to connect with me and with a community of people that talk about things like this all the time, there is a Luciferian Research Society Discord server, which is public and free and open to anybody who's interested that is willing to play nice, and not just go in there and troll and be disruptive. But if you're sincere, anybody is welcome to come in and interact and have conversations and things like that. And I'll put an invite link in the description of this video afterwards, and I will put a link in an invite link to the Discord in a comment section, and I'll pin that comment so that you can find it in either of those two places after this live stream is over and it turns into an archive video. And in addition to that, I have a private Discord server for the Novus Ordo Luciferi. That is an esoteric order that I founded back in December 21st of 2023, which was based off of material and organizations that I had run in the past, that if you know my history, you'll know which ones I'm talking about. But took the the spirit of some of those organizations. I kind of fused it together and put it into this new format, which combined a lot of my previous projects together into the Novus Ordo Luciferi, or NOL. And you can join that order by going to the Patreon at Novus Ordo Luciferi. You can go to novusordoluciferi.org and you can join. It has two options of what you can join. Either you can go monthly. There's membership dues that are very reasonable, $5 a month, or if you wanted to pay up for a full year up front, $55, you could save a month. And in the Novus Ordo Luciferi, we learn about, I teach what I call Luciferian alchemy. Now, this is a complete system of occultism that I've developed, in which the primary goal is to achieve the quintessence of the self, to put yourself through the alchemical process, internal alchemy, you could say, in which you are uniting the various different aspects of the self into a complete harmonized self, which gives rise to your own quintessential nature. And that is a point of power and stability that allows you to become a sovereign entity and not subjected to the archons anymore. So there's a whole set of teachings that involve lucid dreaming, and there's a full course available if you join. That is about, I think it's like 12 hours worth of material, video lessons. There is also a set of about 12 hours worth of video lessons for tarot, the esoteric secrets of the tarot and the new Luciferian era reformatting of the tarot. We have courses on manifestation, which we've been calling money magic. And there are more. There's always more coming out, and we're building an archive of these lessons that you can access, as well as written material of teachings of like philosophy and principles and concepts, as well as actual practices that involve, like I said, lucid dreaming, astral projection, working with the tarot in various ways, not just divination. There's tarot magic that you can do with that. Energy work, a lot of which is heavily inspired by Taoist internal alchemy. Hermetic alchemy, in terms of like lab alchemy. Ritual magic, ceremonial magic. The full gamut, essentially, of different types of practices that all support one another and are all focused ultimately on achieving that complete harmonized self, that individuation process. Shadow work is part of this as well, where we seek to take the various different fragmentary aspects of our shattered psyche to separate them out, heal and integrate each individual part, and then combine it all together and forge a solid unit, essentially a unity of the self. On the left-hand path, sometimes we refer to this as the infernal union, but it's not just infernal, it's supernal as well. It's the fusion of all aspects of the self into, like I said, a complete harmonized self, the quintessence of the self. And from that position, you can become a sovereign entity, or some people like to poetically refer to it as a god. Or in Taoism, they refer to it as a Taoist immortal. Or you could call it becoming a Buddha, right? Let's see here. So if you join the Novus Ordo Luciferi, then you will get access to the private Novus Ordo Luciferi Discord server as well. But if you want, I highly recommend checking out the free public Luciferian Research Society Discord server. I'll put a link in the description and in the comments for people who want to join that, and they can participate in that completely for free. If they want to get more in depth into this Luciferian alchemy practice, then they can join the Novus Ordo Luciferi and join a community of people around the world. We have people in at least 11 different countries at this point, that are all working together to learn the systems. We're building local branches where people can meet up in person as well as online and share ideas, support one another's spiritual path, and engage in group rituals and ceremonies, that sort of thing. So if you're interested in that, the links will be in the description and in the comments for that as well. But yeah, definitely, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, definitely at the very least join the Luciferian Research Society podcast. There's a podcast, an old podcast associated with it as well. But yeah, I meant to say Discord server, which is completely free. Let's see here. Somebody said I like holographic theory and dream theory. Yeah, holographic. That's why I like calling it the hologram generator, because it's a fully immersive 3-4 dimensional simulation that we get. It's so immersive that we get caught up in it. We identify with aspects of it and think that we are just one part of it and not another part. But yeah, there's a deep, deep connection between each different element that it's just we're so fragmented that we don't recognize that. And but if we can become lucid, the more lucidity we can gain and the more wisdom we can achieve from those lucid experiences, we can start recognizing these things and acting accordingly and achieving higher levels of personal individuation, and we can assist in making the world a better place in general. What I've noticed is, though, say I fell asleep at night, it would be my night in my dream, and when I was flying, but during the day, it would be sunny, as if it was still the world. Yeah, I don't know. I've had lots of dreams in the middle of the night where it was sunny. You know, I've had dreams where I've fallen asleep during the day and had dreams where it was nighttime. So I don't think that that's, you know, it it's different. It comes out the way it comes out because of the data that's being processed and rendered into symbolic forms. So it depends on the context of the data that your mind is processing. Let's see here. I saved the website. I'll join on payday. Thank you for your knowledge. And oh, great. Thanks, Chris. Looking forward to working with you on that. Seamus, hey, I made it. What did I miss? You'll have to watch this after the fact, Seamus. You missed the whole friggin' thing. That's so funny. But I'm glad you're here now. Chris said, I started experiencing sleep paralysis at a young age, and from that, I learned to lucid dream. Yeah. So this is another thing that we can get into before I sign off here is the future evolution of humanity. So we have these, like I said, we have these various different states that we go through. We have the void, which is just pure substrate mind with no experience arising within it in the moment. We have the solar dream, in which a simulation is arising out of the substrate mind from the void that is a symbolic representation of physical sense organ data, meaningful patterns detected within that. And we have the lunar dream, the experience, the symbolic experience generated from meaningful patterns detected in the more subtle data streams, such as from our own psyche or from other parts of the multiverse, perhaps. Now, there are states that we can get into where it's an experience, let's say, but it's not tuned specifically to the solar channel or tuned specifically to a lunar channel. It's somewhere in between. And there's a bunch of different kind of spots in between that we find ourselves in. Sleep paralysis is one of those, you could call it a bardo as well. It's in between a solar and lunar dream, but it's not a gap between them. It's a place on the spectrum between them. So if you can think of the data coming in through the solar channel and the data coming in through the lunar channel as existing as two different sections of bandwidth within a full spectrum. So let's say maybe you could think of it as light. So maybe the spectrum of light, you're just focused on a certain spectrum of light, and then you focus on a different spectrum of light, you know. Well, in sleep paralysis, you're getting solar data coming in, because your eyes are awake, or so your eyes are open. You're getting visual information from the room. You're hearing noises from that are naturally occurring in the room, that sort of thing. But you also are getting lunar channel data impinging upon that. So lunar signal data getting rendered symbolically into your experience seamlessly, completely seamlessly. You are observing your room that you're in, that you're sleeping in, while your body is experiencing this paralysis, which naturally happens every night so that we don't play out the dreams physically in our body, which could be very dangerous. But your body is not, you can't move it, but your eyes are open, you're observing the room around you, and elements of the astral, you could say, are getting rendered symbolically into that experience. And you could perhaps see somebody in the room sitting on the end of your bed, sitting on your chest, perhaps. This is often referred to as old hag. You could be having an experience with entities, which could be perceived as aliens or supernatural entities such as gods and goddesses. I had a very potent experience one time where I wasn't paralyzed, like I wasn't having sleep paralysis, but it was similar in the sense that I was in my room looking around and seeing my room, but there were also elements of the lunar channel seamlessly integrating into that experience that I was having. And I feel like I was in, my belief is that I was pulled into that in between state. I could move around. I wasn't sleep paralysis, so my eyes were open. I was in the room. I could see the room, but I could also see an entity, and I could hear other entities in the other part of the house. And this entity was a goddess. I believe I refer to it as a goddess. Like it might have been Hecate, it might have been Erishkigal. What name you put on it depends on which cultural lens you're kind of seeing it through. But I've talked about this in other live streams and other videos before. So if you go through my channels, you're eventually going to come across that story. But that's an in-between state where you're kind of tuned between channels and you're getting crosstalk, you could say. Now, lucid dreaming is kind of further on that scale, where you're having the primary experience you're having is a lunar dream. You're asleep and you're immersed within a dreaming experience, and a sleep dreaming experience. But you become lucid. You become aware that you're asleep and experiencing a dream. And you can recall, sometimes you can't. Sometimes there's a barrier, but sometimes when you become lucid, you get access to memories from outside that universe, that entire plane of existence, that the astral plane. You can recall things from your waking experience, from the solar experience, and you can be like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember earlier today I was going about my business, cleaning the house or taking a drive or whatever, and then I came home and I went to sleep, and now I am asleep and I'm having a dream. And you can remember, you can bring those memories in, and that is a blending as well. And so there's different types of blending that can happen, and there's even another form called that I like to call mental projection, where you're fully aware of the physical body, but it ends up fading into the background. It's a very minor background that you almost forget about, but not quite. Um, but you're experiencing this imaginal realm, this lunar realm in your essentially a daydream, and in that state, it can become very real. And people who are writers, for example, they go into this sometimes by accident when they are writing out what their characters are doing and stuff. They can get so caught up in it that it takes on a life of its own, and the characters start doing things and saying things that surprise the writer themselves that created the fictional character in the first place. Very similar type of thing like that. And that's another type of blending between the two. And I feel like at some point, if we as a species continue to survive and evolve, that at some point we won't experience these as separate things. We'll be able to recognize that certain parts of our experience are from the more subtle realms, and some of the elements of our experience are from what we think of today as the physical material plane, you know. Those are just terms, right? Both of them are simulations of, that are being generated, but we will experience these as a united experience that will have the mental capacity to process, in a way that doesn't endanger our survival. Okay, let's see if we got any other comments here. I was kind of good at dream stuff as a teen until I denied the speaking inside my head to beings, because that was a mental illness and it freaked me out. So my spiritual ability to do things, yeah, went away for almost 20 years until I could accept it, believe it. Yeah, Athena, hi, yell. Yeah, that's pretty common. A lot of people will have a very rich dreaming life as a young person, as a teen, but at some point, something happens, a mental switch gets flicked. I'm not sure exactly, but it all stops. And eventually, with work later along down the line, it can be recovered and you can get that back. But what this reminds me of is an H.P. Lovecraft story called The Silver Key, I believe it is, and there's a sequel to it, the Silver Gate, I think, maybe, or the Gate of the Silver Key or something. Anyways, there's a main story, and then there's also a sequel to it, I believe, or Through the Silver Gate, something like that. But Randolph Carter, who is a semi-autobiographical character, he is a master dreamer and then loses it for years and eventually has to go on this quest to kind of regain the key to his own inner astral plane. And it gets kind of interesting. I don't want to spoil it for you, but that's what it kind of reminds me of. And I've definitely felt that before too, because I went through a similar thing. Chris said that they visited underwater bases, but always put it down to just dreaming. Yeah, well, I mean, it's not necessarily that you experienced that it's literal. It may not be literal that you, in your dream, remote viewed some physical location. Not, it could be a completely symbolic um, representation of some sort of data. It doesn't mean just because it's not, just because I'm saying it's real, or I'm saying it's as real and as unreal as each other. That the waking experience and the dreaming experience, or the solar dream and the lunar dream, are both real and they're both unreal at the same time. They're both simulations and they're both symbolic. So yeah, just because you had a dream about visiting an underwater base doesn't mean that you somehow in your dream remote viewed a physical location that literally exists. It could just be symbolic. But yeah, that idea of just dreaming, that's a consequence of living and being raised in a wake-centric society. And I think that it's done a lot of damage to it. It's squelched our potential considerably. Bear said, when I was a child, I was placed on REM blockers due to having many waking terrors. Interesting. Um, there are other things that block REM. For example, THC, which you find in cannabis, um, suppresses the rapid eye movement REM phase of sleep, which is where we have our most intense dreams. And once you stop taking it and it leaves your body, you go into REM rebound, where you have extra REM. And that's a really potent state to practice lucid dreaming in, that sort of thing. Now, you can do this, but it takes a long time. THC has a long half life in the body, so it could take days to leave your body and then start to experience REM rebound. There's another substance that you can take that does the same sort of thing, but on a much shorter time scale, has a much shorter half-life in the body, and that's melatonin. And it's a natural substance your body already generates. Don't take the time release. This is what you do. About a couple hours before you're going to go to bed, take a small dose of melatonin, not time release. Don't get the time release one. Just get the regular, basic, cheapo melatonin. Take it a couple hours before you go to bed. It suppresses REM in the first half of your sleep. So basically the first 4-5 hours of your sleep, for example, the first 3-4-5 hours of your sleep, it's going to suppress the REM. But by that point, it's starting to break down in the body. And then the last couple hours of your sleep, you're going to experience REM rebound. And you're going to get really intense dreams during that last couple hours, which is where you're more likely to experience lucid dreams anyways. So that's kind of a technique you can use for that. I wouldn't do it all the time, but once in a while, with very intentional planning and specific intent and training, that can be a very interesting tool to use. But I would avoid THC if you want to do a lot of this type of work, because it lasts in the body for so long, and it suppresses REM for a really long time. I see, what else we got here? People are talking about night terrors, seeing things flying around their room. see here. Chris said it took a month for those REM blockers to leave their system. Oh yeah, Bear said that they were hit like a meteor with hardcore REM rebound. There's two Chris's in here, but one of the other Chris's says forgot about melatonin that used to help them astral project. Yeah, I see astral projection and lucid dreaming as kind of two aspects of the same sort of phenomenon, which I refer to as lunar dreaming. But I think everything's a dream, so people get mad when I say that astral projection is a type of dream, a type of a dreaming, because they say, no, it's real. Well, I'm not saying it's not real. I'm saying it's a dream, which I think every experience that we have is a dream. The waking experience is a dream. I'm not saying that that's not real. I'm saying it's just as real and just as unreal as when we go to sleep and dream. There's different rules to it. Like I said, we're in our own kind of sandbox for the most part, when we go to sleep and dream. We typically are we stay generally within our own locale of the astral planes, which in effect means that we're interacting within our own psyche. And when we're having the solar dream, we are interacting with not just our own local psyche, but with a lot of other people's psyches as well, that are all co-creating a shared environment together, in a sense. And so when you're having an astral projection, generally you are having a dream, essentially, like an asleep dreaming experience, but you have traveled outside of your own local area of the astral realm. That's your own psyche, your own local environment. You've kind of traveled beyond that. And that's kind of what I think of as astral projection these days. But in everything that we experience is a type of dream. So don't get mad that I say that it's a dream, because I say everything is. Past lives. What happens when you remember your dreams and you smoke? I assume you mean like smoking marijuana or cannabis. Yeah, I mean, it's just you're less likely to remember your dreams. It's harder to remember your dreams, but you can still have dreams. You could be smoking like crazy and you can still have dreams, but it's a lot less likely to have longer, intense dreams that you remember, but you still can. It doesn't really mean anything. It just means that, the dream was intense enough for you to remember it, even with REM being suppressed somewhat. It doesn't necessarily completely suppress it, but it just makes it way harder. Okay, yeah, some people are talking about past lives and that kind of thing, and I think that's really interesting. I've got my own kind of take on that. If you go to my channel and look up what happens when an alchemist dies, I think is what I called it, something like that. That one I kind of go into in depth on, the whole, my own take on what I think the afterlife experience ends up being, and what you can do about it, how you can prepare for that. And what you do to prepare for that essentially is what I call Luciferian alchemy, and I have a full set of occult practices and teachings that are being taught through the Novus Ordo Luciferi that you can participate in if you join that. But yeah, there's a, you don't need to necessarily go through my specific way of going about it, but I've been at this I've been a serious occultist for about 30 years now, because I picked it up when I was a teenager. I was very serious about it. I was doing it daily practice and everything for about 30 years now, and I've been continuing to study and research and practice and experiment and integrate those experiences. And so if you want to benefit from that, then I would highly recommend joining the Novus Ordo Luciferi and exploring those teachings and those practices and engage with them and engage with the community of other people that are in that order. And yeah, I think we're kind of oh, and if you join the Novus Ordo Luciferi, you can get complimentary access to the Luciferian Research Society website. Now, the Discord server for the LRS is free, but there's a membership website for the LRS that is members only, and then you got to pay like $1 a month to participate in that, because there are service fees for me to continue to run that, and that helps me pay helps me pay those fees and that kind of thing to keep that up. But if you are an NOL member, then you don't have to pay that extra $1 to join the LRS. You get it included as one of the perks of your membership. Okay, so I think that's about it. We've been on here for close to 2.5 hours now. Actually, 2 hours, 22 minutes, and 22 seconds. So I think that's a good point to leave off at. Thank you so much to everybody who came in and participated in the discussion. There was so many amazing comments, and I set this live stream so that if anybody is watching this after the fact, they can look at the chat replay, the live chat replay, if they choose to, and they can see all the comments that have come in real time as the video plays out if they want to. So I included that in the settings when I set up this live stream. So if you're watching this as an archive and you didn't realize, you can go back and watch it again and turn on the live chat replay, and you can watch the comments that come in, because there's a lot of really good comments, and I appreciate everybody here who came to check out this live stream to listen to me rant on about these really amazing ideas, the fascinating concepts, my own take on them, where I agree, where I differ, and I hope you got something out of it. I know I sure did. And to all of you who are watching this as an archive, if you've made it this far, I would really appreciate if you would click like on the channel. If you're not already subscribed, then please subscribe to the channel. Apparently in the algorithm, subscriptions don't really matter all that much anyways, but it will help you stay informed and notified about any videos that come out. I've been putting out a lot of shorts, which are clips from old live streams and newer live streams. Really, pithy clips out of those that are really share something. And yeah, I've been trying to be very active on this channel as well as on other social media. And yeah, connect with me. Subscribe to this channel to get to those notifications. And if you click like, if you share it, you're going to get the algorithm to tell you which other videos are similar and that you might like, and hopefully a lot of those are my videos as well. But yeah, apparently the way the algorithm works now is it's more about likes, watch time, retention, that sort of thing, and then subscriptions aren't really as important, but it's still nice to see when people subscribe to your channel. It's a way of showing your support, at least, and I would appreciate that if you lasted to the end of this video, if you stuck in for 2.5 hours, then please show your appreciation with a like. If you're on the live stream right now, click the like before we sign off here, and